Cool, cool, cool. I'm recording it, John, so I can share it because there are some people that could not attend. So I hope it's okay.
Sure.
Great, John. We're on time, so I think we just kick it off. Thank you very much, John, for saying yes to my invite to attend the webinar here.
You bet.
But we talk about our baby, right?
Yep. Well, I don't know that that's the right analogy, but
okay. But it's our passion.
Our share, yeah, our passion here.
Our shared passion. So
Yeah.
thank you for that. You've been an inspiration for me for years, John. And when I first found out about Zero Trust, many things fall into place because I was thinking similar, but you think it even broader more. So it was like many pieces fell into place in 2012, 13 for me when I was introduced to Zero Trust. That was really cool. And since then we met several times and worked together. So I'm proud of that. So yeah, I wanted to have this small chat because Zero Trust has been out now for close to 13 years, right? 2010?
2010 is when the paper was published, yes.
Exactly. So I assume and expect most people to have heard about the why Zero Trust and why the reason why all that stuff. I wanted to challenge you just in a minute or two. I heard you once being challenged to present Zero Trust in 2 minutes, and you did. But
I think he gave me 4 minutes actually in that clip. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I can give you 4 minutes on the why the Zero Trust, but I wanted more to look at the how the Zero Trust. I mean, how can we actually make people take the next step actually to move into Zero Trust, what to do and what not to do, and your experiences with more than 10 years helping customers to implement Zero Trust is like, yeah, we can't implement it like a technical feature, I know, but so share some experiences so that the audience can hear what is it and what isn't it, and what should we do and what should we not do. So could you do like a 2, 3, 4 minute why Zero Trust like you did in that show I saw?
Sure. I mean, I'm happy to do that, right? And just hi everybody out there, and I suppose Norway. Are we mostly talking to Norway right now?
Norway. So
yeah. So I got my
speak Norwegian.
No, I don't speak Norwegian, but I'm half Norwegian. So I have my flag here.
Yeah.
That I keep here. This is from the 1953. Well, you call it football. I think we call it soccer here in the U.S. Yeah. My great uncles won this in 1953. They played for Stavanger Vikings. It's the first time a championship had been won since World War II, because the Germans shut it all down, you know. So my great aunt, she was like 93 when the last time I saw you. I was over there, and she gave that to me.
Yeah,
and it's kind of special. I keep it right there. So yeah. So welcome everyone. So what is Zero Trust, right? So Zero Trust is really a cybersecurity strategy. That's the first thing to think about. This is something that has been designed to be strategically resonant to the highest levels of any organization. So I've talked to CEOs, I've talked to generals and admirals, I've talked to members of boards of directors, I've talked to leaders of all kinds, and they get it relatively easily. They need a strategy to hold on to. The idea of strategy is that it's a big idea to achieve a larger goal, what are known as grand strategic goals, because these people are what I call grand strategic actors, right? They define the grand strategy for the entity that you're part of. And most of us aren't grand strategic actors. So we sit in the other side of it, which is tactical. Tactical are the things you use to achieve that big idea. And so sometimes we get way down in the weeds in thinking about things that really don't matter, right? And so we have to define that grand strategic objective. And this is the thing that you and I talked about, which is stopping data breaches, which is the exfiltration of sensitive or regulated data from our systems or networks into the hands of malicious actors. It's exfiltration, right? That's what a breach is. And I know you sent me a couple of emails about that saying, yeah, but all these other cybersecurity sites define a breach as when something comes in, and that's an intrusion. Why don't you define it that way? Because GDPR and CCPA and PCI and all the regulations define a data breach as exfiltration of that sensitive or regulated data. So we have to change our terminology and our definitions to meet the needs of the grand strategy, which is often defined partially by these big regulatory systems that exist. GDPR isn't just for the European Union, it's for everybody in the world, because everybody has customers who are citizens of the EU. And so that's why it's important to think of we're trying to stop that outbound stuff, right? Everything you're going to get malicious actors in your environment. Can they get stuff out is the big question. And then how long, right? We saw this weekend, that the GoDaddy data breach, the dwell time there, how much time the malicious actors have been inside there was 3 years, I think, which is unconscionable, right? But it's because you're looking in the wrong place. You're looking at the perimeter. You're not looking at what's really happening. I mean, I talk to people all the time. We don't even monitor internal servers because they're internal. How would anybody get to them? We can't do it, so therefore no one can. So these are some of the flaws that we have systemically in our environment. And so what zero trust does is it kind of inverts that whole problem. And it says, we're never going to be able to protect everything in a singular way. So cybersecurity is a really big problem, and but we can break it down into manageable chunks. And so that's the first thing we're going to do, is we're going to break it down into the manageable chunks so that we can solve this problem. So I'm going to bring up the 5-step methodology. I think that's the first thing that I want to focus on today is, how are we doing this? How do we do this journey? Because I think based upon what you told me is we're gonna have a pretty technical audience here, right?
Yeah, it's a mix. But still, what you present now isn't that deep technical anyway. It's like more the mentality around how to do it, right?
Right. So we'll go over here because this should resonate with the audience. And you're gonna pronounce it, because then I'm gonna get in trouble if I pronounce these things. What does this say right here?
Flørlig stairs. Yeah. People are
Flørlig stairs in where?
Lysefjorden.
Lysefjorden. See, I can't do that.
You can say the fjord.
Yeah, the fjord in Norway. Yeah. So I took this picture in 2019, which I think was the last time I saw you. We went up to where'd we go? What was that city where they had Mexican food for the event? Just north of Stavanger. We flew up there. Help me.
Yes, Sandnes.
Bergen.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So I live in Texas, but I'm half Norwegian, so I not that I understand the culture, but I have an affinity for it, and it was fun. So we were up there, and so this is the Fleury stairs. I can't do that, man. It makes me sound like we just don't have those intonations in English. But you have these stairs, right? And what you have over here, you have this mountain, right? And this mountain was carved up. If you ever have a chance to go there, it's on an island, and they built these stairs. These stairs are why is that doing that? My pen isn't working today. Hold on. There we go. That should work. There we go. These stairs, there's 4,444 stairs. This is the world's longest wooden staircase right here. And people come from all over the world to climb this. And I was thinking as I was looking at this, because I had, people, they were saying, well, this is on people's bucket list. When I got up here, man, I was like, oh, I'm going to kick the bucket if I go all the way up there. I no way. And it occurred to me that because there's a museum here and it shows all the things people carried up there, and they have one piece of an iron bar or something. And I mean, it's really heavy, and they carried that up those stairs. Well, how do you do that? You do that by starting with step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. So that's the important thing to understand, is that you do this one at a time. And so we break cybersecurity down into small, manageable parts, and those parts are called a protect surface, right? So the fundamental concept that you need to understand is this concept of protect surface right here. If that doesn't resonate, you'll never get zero trust, because we don't want to think of security in the traditional manner, right? That we're securing devices or anything like that. We're securing, we're protecting your environment, and we're breaking your environment down into multiple small chunks that we call a protect surface. So a protect surface is the area in which we put DAS elements in. So what we do is we put DAS elements. This is a term I created to help you easily remember how to do things. So remember, when you're doing something like this, you're creating something like zero trust, you're always trying to make it so that it can be easily messaged and then remembered. So DAS elements, you'll see that in the end stack report, which is authoritative, we would say, on what zero trust is. So if anybody says something that deviates from the end stack report, they probably don't know what they're talking about. And most of the people who are talking about zero trust don't have any experience with it. That's what I like working with Joran, because I know, because I've worked with him, that he has a lot of experience doing this kind of stuff and a lot of insight. So now we look at what sensitive data do you have, or what sensitive applications are you using, or what sensitive assets run your environment, or what sensitive services keep everything moving. And so we take a single DAS element and we put it into a single protect surface, and we build this out one protect surface at a time. And this makes zero trust 3 things, and this is super important. So try to remember these things. First of all, it makes zero trust incremental. We're doing it one at a time. Okay. You want one protect surface at a time, one protect surface at a time, one protect surface at a time. And then it's iterative. It's one after another. One protect surface, then we do the next protect surface, and then we do the next protect surface. And that makes it non-disruptive. The most you can screw up at any one time is one protect surface. And a protect surface can be very, very small, right? It could contain, it could be, something like your PCI environment if you're doing credit cards, but it could be one particular, here's something, DNS, right? Has data, it's an application, it's an asset, and it's a service. It's all 3 of those things. But your main DNS server could be just something that simple. So whatever that is, we need to come on, erase. We need to figure out how to deal with that, right? And so once we've taken and we put a single DAS element into this, we're going to then, and maybe we call this the DNS protect surface. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to map the transaction flows. So we're asking the question, how does that protect surface work together as a system? How does the system work? And this is incredibly important, because this area, which a lot of people think is silly, right? Why would you do that, John? Well, because this is when you're most vulnerable in the process of building a zero trust environment. because we're doing the building. This is where you can really screw things up. And so the reason is because you're working with people who weren't around when whatever system that you're working on was built. There's no institutional knowledge of how this system worked. So one of the early environments that I was working on was putting a point of sale system into a zero trust environment. And somebody was, in the process of this, went into the data center and said, wow, this is a really old server. And based upon what they perceived as the age of the server, took it out of the system thinking it had no value. It did nothing. No one knew what it did. No, anybody know what server, whatever it was, XYZ does? No. Well, I guess we don't need it. Well, it took the entire point of sales system down worldwide. Now, not that that was a well-architected system if you can take out one server, but it just shows how fragile a lot of things are, because somebody put it in, a decade before, and it had always worked, and it was a polling server. It pulled credit card information from all these systems worldwide and pushed them to the back-end settlement system. And without it, the whole thing was dead. And no one knew what the software was. No one knew how it worked. But suddenly the whole thing died because no one had thought through the process. And so that's when I put in this step, right? So, okay, now we know how it works. And that's going to tell us how to protect it, what controls we need to put into place. This is why we do architecture third, right? So we always used to start with reference architectures that you would get published typically by Cisco, and then you would just build that for somebody, and you'd functionally just change the IP addresses of the reference architecture, and you'd build exactly what Cisco showed you in the book, and then it would work. The packets would move, but it never fit the needs of the business. The business would say, thanks. You've given us a wonderful network here, but hey guys, it's got round holes and we have square pegs. How do we deal with that? And you're like, well, see, Cisco thinks about that kind of stuff and gives us free whittling knives. So you guys make your stuff fit what we've built, as if we in IT are the most important part of the business, that the business makes its money off of IT, which in some ways it does, but only if we are of service to the business, right? We serve the business, we make it work, we structure it, but we have to do it in a way that is simple and that's understandable and that meets the needs of the business. And so then we had this movement of shadow IT or rogue IT, I've heard it called, where people outside of IT just built IT systems to get things done, and we were mad about it. Ooh, they're doing rogue IT or shadow IT. And then they started going to the cloud, and we're mad about that. They're going around us. Of course they're going around us, because we made it so hard for things to get done. And then when they got done, they didn't meet the needs of the business because we didn't understand what the business was doing. And so it's our fault. It's our fault when these bad things happen, or things that we don't want to happen, because we don't communicate with the business, and we want the business to come down to our level. I did research, primary research at Forrester on this topic about, business alignment with IT. And in short, I had IT leaders and business leaders stack rank priorities. And the top three priorities for business leaders were increase revenue, increase profitability, and stop data exfiltration. That was the only thing that was IT or technical or cybersecurity that they chose. And those were the bottom three priorities of IT leaders. They cared about increased patch rates and, help desk ticket times and blah, blah, blah. And at the very bottom was increase revenue, increase profitability, and stop data exfiltration. Well, no wonder we're not aligned. But we have to align with them. We have to move upwards. They're never going to move down on our level. They don't care about spanning tree. They don't care about BGP and DNS, and they shouldn't. Those things should be, and they don't care about phishing attacks. Don't spend any money on training your people to stop phishing attacks. I think security awareness training is just the biggest scam ever, because these are things that computers need to do, and people are not good enough to do that. But we get lazy and we say, well, we trained them to do it, so it's their fault. So this is why you need to understand how the system works, and now you can start to build this environment. So now I've built out the environment, and I have to then create policy around it. We'll talk more about that, I'm assuming. So this is where everything happens. Zero trust is ultimately instantiated as a, sorry, I don't know why it did that. It went to the screen that I wanted. As a, oh no, it's all screwed up. Sometimes this pen goes a little crazy on me. So it's not gonna let me do it. Okay, so we're going to create a policy, a layer 7 policy, and then monitor and maintain this whole thing. And so the idea is that by doing that, we can go in and we can constantly create a feedback loop on this 5-step methodology and make things better and better and stronger over time. And this is known as anti-fragility, right? Have you read Anti-Fragile yet after all the times I've told you about it?
It's on my to-do list, John.
It's on your to-do list. Good.
Yeah.
So there's a book called Anti-Fragile by a man named Taleb. And I would encourage everybody to read it. But what he talks about is that there are systems that are fragile, and robust. But hey, there's this system in between here called anti-fragile. And an anti-fragile system, he gives the example of the human body. You need to lose weight. So you start working out, you diet, you exercise, you put your body under a tremendous amount of stress. And it is the stress that your body adapts to make it stronger. It adapts to stress, and it's that adaptation that makes you anti-fragile. And this is the same thing that we can do in a zero trust environment. We can make it anti-fragile. So the more stress it gets under, which is the attacks, we can figure out what's going on with those attacks, make sure those things can't happen again. And so your environment becomes anti-fragile, and it's constantly in this loop, right? It's a process, not a product. So you're never going to be done with it. And it's not just a project you can finish. So, but what you want it to do is get in this state of anti-fragility where it's constantly monitoring, maintaining, and functionally on its own, as much as you can in using automation, making itself stronger and stronger. So the 5-step model, Joran, is the fundamental place that everybody needs to start. If you don't understand that, you can't do zero trust.
Yeah, I agree. And I've been working with multiple customers, and you've said it multiple times. We need to think security inbound and out instead of the traditional outbound in.
Right.
Because the huge focus for decades has been on endpoint security and protect the endpoint from being hacked so that it can abuse your policies that you as a user are allowed to. So
so hold on, that you brought up an interesting thought, because you said we focus on endpoint security because, and do you want to know why we really focus on endpoint security? I'm going to give you
tell me
it's not what you think it is. We focus on endpoint security because it's easy to calculate the revenue that we're going to gain from it. So therefore, venture capitalists will fund endpoint security. So it's easy to say, this client has 100,000 endpoints at $5 an endpoint per year, right? Or whatever it is, that's 500,000 a year in revenue. I mean, that would be a very cheap endpoint, but still, we can calculate that. Versus you and I both worked at Palo Alto Networks at the same time, and sometimes it was hard to calculate how to get revenue from, say, a next generation firewall, because you're looking at traffic that's variable over time. And can you do it on a consumption model? Do you do it on a device model? But then when they start consuming more and blah, 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 blah. And venture capitalists don't like that. They want something simple that they can understand because they aren't the sharpest knives in the drawer sometimes related to cybersecurity anyway. They're really good at finance, but they're not good at understanding what you and I do. And so the problem with endpoint security is the endpoint should never be a protect surface. Okay? The endpoint should never be a protect surface because you should not be walking around with a laptop that contains all kinds of sensitive data on it anymore.
Exactly.
Right? Those days are dead. So what we want to do with zero trust and endpoints is make sure the endpoint can't participate in the attack because somebody took it over, and so we want to stop the exploitation of the endpoint. But the endpoint itself isn't the be all end all anymore. That's not the grand strategic reason we do cybersecurity, but we've been brainwashed into believing that that's where we should start because that's what the first technologies were. The first problem we had was the Morris worm. It was an endpoint attack. Well, it kind of attacked everything, but then the first things that people started building, John McAfee builds McAfee, Eugene Kaspersky builds Kaspersky, Eva Chen and her ex-husband build Trend Micro, Robert Graham builds Black Ice. They all focus on endpoints. So the first technologies were sort of endpoint security, but dang, that's hard to manage,
Yeah, but from this, John, you talk about the 5 steps. I want to talk a little bit about the human aspect there, the people responsible, not the end users, but the people responsible, everyone from the IT department and up. What do you see as the biggest challenge? I mean, to get to the 5 steps, you need to do something before you actually start with the 5 steps, right? You have to make the organization and the responsible to actually understand why this is happening and why this is important, and like the assume compromise, the assume intrusion and all that stuff, so they understand. Because when I work with customers, they build flat infrastructure in 2023.
Right.
I mean,
well,
I see Windows servers of different roles. I see them together with Linux machines. It's flat. Sometimes even in 2023, we see clients and servers in the same segment. And we treat computers differently based on where they are physically located, right?
Yeah.
What do you see as a challenge based on your many years experience working with customers on Zero Trust when it comes to the human perspective to actually make them open their eyes and actually start the process?
So it's going to be based on the incentives of your organization. If you just want to do it the fastest, easiest way, then you're just going to do a flat network and put it wherever you want, and who cares, and all that kind of stuff. So what you have to do is have your leadership want to do zero trust. So you start by messaging this to the highest levels of the organization. Get to the CEO, the board, get to the CIO, get as high as you can, and get the buy-in from there. The president of the United States issued an executive order in 2021 that changed the incentive structure in a lot of places worldwide that said it's okay to do this, and so let's do it. But if you're just trying to get it to bubble up from the ground up and get regular IT people to adopt it, yeah, you're going to find a few here and there, probably the people on this call who are willing to look at things from a different perspective. But my goodness, if I had a kroner for every time somebody said that's not the way we've always done it, I'd be really rich. I'd be able to go back and buy the old family fjord there south of Stavanger. That's not the way we've always done it. Well, the way we've always done it hasn't worked, so let's try something new. How about that? Think about that. And then they don't want to think about that because they don't want to do any work, right? I mean, we're as human beings, we're fundamentally lazy. We're looking for ways to do things the easiest, the simplest way. And the simplest way is what's already there. and just continue that on. So there has to be a mind shift to want to do better cybersecurity. Now that can come from inside yourself because you care, right? And I hope that's true of everybody on this call. I hope you care greatly and you understand that this is a mission driven business and that you can, you can make your organization or your country better little bit every single day by going down this path. I hope that's true. But if that's not true, we need to get the people above you to force you to do it, and then you'll just do it because that's your job to get it done. So
one step at a time.
Yeah. Yeah. If think of yourself as you're either contributing to the goodness of the process or you're inhibiting it and you're part of the problem. I mean, it's one of those two. You just can't sit passively by. And so a lot of people are just part of the problem because they don't want to do anything different. They don't want to change. Change is hard. I get it. No one likes change. But you look at this GoDaddy thing and you think, well, that was my data, right? This is we're so almost immune to a lot of these things. They call it breach fatigue. Oh, that was only 1 million records. Well, behind every record is a person, a human being. And so understand that if you're in cybersecurity, you're in an adversarial business. There are only 3 adversarial businesses in the world. There is the military, there is law enforcement, and then there's us, right? And while our company or our organization may have competitors, we in our role have adversaries. And so we have a whole different thing that we have to do, a game we have to play. And so the more we can do to stop the adversaries from doing bad things to our organization, the better we're going to make the world over time. So again, making the world better is incremental. You just can't do it in one sweeping motion. So you have to take a similar approach to making the world better. And one of the things you can do is whatever business you're in, you work for a bank. Well, make sure your customers don't get their data breached. You work for a hospital. Make sure that when they're in the middle of an MRI, it isn't shut down because some hacker hacked it, right? Whatever those things are, you can make it better for human beings. That's the human aspect of it, is that this ultimately comes down and filters down to human beings having a better quality of life or getting things done that they need to get done, or just being able to rest easy at night knowing that their data is secure.
Yeah. I try to, I've been working for many years to push very hard into the brains and the mindset of people to really take this, to understand the big why. And I play with the assume compromise, assume ransomware, like a technical things, because I say to them this: you can't use statistics to say, will I be compromised? Will I get ransomware? Well, of course there's statistics if you will get it, but you need to 100% assume, because assuming the opposite is the recipe for disaster.
Well, and the statistics are skewed because people don't report
True
cybersecurity incidents, right? So how do I know those statistics are true?
Yeah.
I don't. And we can't build actuarial tables for cybersecurity the way we can for, well, the danger of riding your motorcycle around Oslo in the middle of winter, right? There's actuarial tables on that, Jorn. But there's none on cybersecurity, and I've tried. I tried for years and years and years, went to the top actuaries and tried and explained this, and they just looked at me like, what? No way. There's way too many variables, right? If you look at the variables of, you're riding a motorcycle this time of day, on this date, which normally has this kind of weather, I can tell you what is your likelihood of having an accident. And then if you have an accident, the people who have motorcycle accidents in this area of Norway, you know, how many of them break their leg, how many of them, you know, go home completely okay, and then how many of them become organ donors. You know, my brother-in-law is a doctor, and he calls motorcyclists future organ donors. That's what he calls calls you guys.
Yeah, we're crazy, but it's a lot of fun till we die.
There you go.
So John, we could have talked for hours. I want to end with, like, based on your experience, this let's start with the negative. What's the problem, and then what's the easy things with when you work with customers as you see it? What's the most challenging thing when you have convinced them that this is the way to go, and then they ask you, can you help us to start the process and implement this? What is the most challenging stuff you see?
The most challenging stuff that I see is that people don't know where their data or assets are located, right? They don't have any kind of inventory. They haven't kept track of it. They can't find it, right? The system works. We know it's working, but we don't know how it's working.
Yeah.
And this is a weird thing. We don't have the diagnostic tools. I mean, if you think about your human body, think of all the tools that exist to test whether or not a system is working, whether it's your heart or your circulation system. You can have an MRI, you can have, you know, x-rays, you can have all kinds of amazing tests done to do that. We don't have that kind of visibility in our environments. And let's call them what they are, networks, right? Because I get a lot of pushback about this term network. Look, wherever data flows, wherever a packet flows, it flows across a network. So would you agree with me that there are networks in clouds?
Someone say.
Yeah, well, there is. I mean, there's a network. A cloud has a network, right?
Yeah.
And so when I think about how a packet moves from point A to point B, this is the fundamental question. So as it moves from point A to B, what visibility do I have in that packet? And I want to have ultimately 100% visibility into 100% of the packets. That's really hard to do, right? And because we're blind on a whole lot of things, this is why we have this term dwell time. Dwell time exists because our controls are in the wrong place. Our controls are typically on the perimeter and the endpoint, and we need to move the controls as close as possible to the protect surface. And once we get the controls close to the protect surface, now you can't hide because because the thing you're trying to attack is the protect surface, right? We talk about the attack surface and we're going to manage the attack surface. No, you're not. Is there a Norwegian term for bamboozle? You know, bamboozle?
No, maybe someone in the call knows, but I haven't heard about it. No.
Bamboozle, like I'm scamming you, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, something like that. You know, I'm making it sound like I'm doing something, but it's not really happening. Yeah, all that stuff is a bamboozle. Think of somebody on the call, find the good Norwegian word for it, because I'll bet it's a cool word. But you know, you don't control that. Focus on the stuff that you can control, not the stuff that you can't control. And the stuff that you can control are the protect surfaces that contain various DAS elements. And so then when I have a protect surface, and let me go to another slide here, and we'll just kind of draw some. There's a couple things that I want people to understand when they show this. So I'm going to probably have to advance here because we're just kind of jumping around, folks, because Jorn and I have been friends for a long, long time. And so we kind of jump around and have these conversations. But if I look at this diagram, this is a basic zero trust environment, right? So I've got here the protect surface, right? And so this protect surface is the card holder. Oh, come on. Card holder data environment. for a PCI environment. So PCI is my DAS element. And you can see here, I put a segmentation gateway as close as possible to the protect surface, right? Because out here is the rest of the network. And so, so what we're doing here is we are then ultimately building out each protect surface one at a time, right? So now we've got protect surface, incremental, iterative, non-disruptive. But a couple things to think about, because somewhere out here, like maybe I'm going to put the evil internet at the bottom, because I hate this term north-south traffic, east-west traffic, blah, 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 because it's all based upon where we drew the first cloud in the first Visio diagram. So I've got an attacker over here, right? That attacker is going to try to come in to this system and get access to the cardholder data. Well, as they come into the system, they get stopped right here. Why? Because there's no rule that allows an unknown user on an unknown IP address to get access to the cardholder data. That rule just doesn't exist, because in zero trust in policy, it's a default deny. And you said something when we were in, what was that town south of Stavanger where we did that?
And was it Amsterdam, the successful attacks?
No. In that, well, I don't know if you said it in Amsterdam, but I thought it was in that town where we did that event in, I think it was like on the edge of the water and the resort there.
Oh, yeah. Solspa, the security.
Yeah. And you said all bad things happen inside of an allow rule.
Yeah.
And I use that every single day. All bad things happen inside of an allow rule. And so what we're trying to do, we start with a default deny. So there's no rule unless you've turned on a rule that says allow any traffic from any IP address on the public internet to get access to the protect surface. This just can't go there. And oh, by the way, all traffic in zero trust is what you would think about as north-south. We get in here and it's going in to the protect surface from wherever, right? Heading that direction. So, I guess we would think about that as north-south, because east-west is internal and we don't care about the internal traffic. We don't have to do anything about it because it's contained within the micro perimeter right here. And so even if malware got on this machine here, you put it on with a USB drive, now you would have to have a rule that says, okay, unknown traffic, unknown payload, right? Unknown traffic from this machine would have to be allowed to go to an unknown command and control server on the outside. So as it gets to this interface, it's dropped here again, right? It's just rejected. So we don't care about that because this is what is often called the blast radius. So we reduce the blast radius way down to just one protect surface. And so, yeah, maybe this machine and if there's 3 or 4 machines in here, they all get compromised, but who cares, right? I mean, we're not trying to get to the perfect.
So John, you are now giving the example of an established zero trust network. Here's the thing: when I talk to customers, because the main example here, you have an attacker on the internet trying to get access to that PCI DOS. Customers say, well, it's not available from the internet. Is it then impossible to reach it?
No.
In soccer, Norwegian football, you have the direct and the indirect free kick. I use that as an example because even if it's not directly available from the internet, if you log into VPN, is it then available from the internet? Yes, it is. The customer will say yes. So people don't see the indirect part, right?
Right. So it's almost irrelevant because the internet is way over here. And so when you're doing zero trust, folks, a couple of things. I threw up the whiteboard because I want you to understand how we whiteboard. We whiteboard from left to right with protect surface on the left, and we finally end up over here with the endpoints. So we invert even the process of whiteboarding to help you think about it. So here's my protect surface. So now what we're going to do is we're going to draw how that works, right? We're going to, say that this protect surface, we kind of understand. We'll pretend we understand the system, and then we say the next thing it does is it connects to this, and then it goes over to Y, and then ultimately it heads to the internet, right? But there's these things in place. So where the controls go? Well, I need a control there. That's my segmentation gateway for that protect surface. Maybe I need another control here because those are two separate policies. However that whole thing works, now I have controls that are defined in policy here. And so if the internet, I guess this was the internet, wherever the internet is, maybe I have two connections to the internet, which is possible, right? But if this thing gets popped somehow, because I'm down here as a user and I go to here and I have a rule to do this, but there's malware, I get popped, right? So now this is why we want endpoint security, because now I'm participating in the attack. And now packets are being generated that look like they're coming from my asserted identity, and they come down through the system. Let's change the color here. They come down through the system, right? And now, because I'm a trusted user, I can get into this system, right? And so now the question becomes, can I get the data out? So if I get the data out, it comes like this, and then it goes back out to the internet. So that's the basic flow. Well, what we're trying to do is restrict and say, should this device have access to all these systems? In a flat network, they do, but in a zero trust network, maybe they don't. Because if this was the cardholder data, if this is cardholder data environment, then actually the only thing that gets allowed to have access to it is some other system. Maybe this system here, system X, can come in and have access to that. So system X gets access to that because it's doing some processing or something. Okay, cool. But now when you're over here as person X and you try to come in here and you get into here, you don't have necessarily access to that. And you certainly don't have access to keep going, right? So that stops. So now, because every single data breach, as soon as the traffic comes from the inside and starts working on from the outside and starts working on the inside, it becomes an insider attack. So we're always worried about how does that attack move around. And so an example for me where I learned about this, doing this kind of stuff, is how do I do it? They've changed the whiteboard tool on me. Here we go. So if you look up VoIP Hopper, right? The way this attack worked is we were in a hotel room with a computer and we attached to the phone system, right? There's the phone and here's the keyboard, and we sent out CDP packets to think that make this so that when this phone connected to the call manager and the whole system, make it think that we're a phone. So then we become a phone over here. And now the phone's on, VLAN 101 is the phone system, and VLAN 102 is the data network. And what we did is once we got the system to believe that we were a phone, we just at layer 2 hopped from the phone VLAN into the data VLAN, and now from a hotel room we're able to access, in fact, the financial systems of this. And I wrote about it in a couple things. We wrote about it in a security focus article. We did, Jason Ostrom and I did, and he's the guy who created the tool. I created some of the narrative around it, and we presented at a couple of cons and stuff like that. But all we had to do is make the system think that our computer was actually a phone, because it couldn't tell the difference at the binary level, right? So it's these kinds of assumptions that there's so many ways to get in that people aren't thinking about. And and I'm not an expert on all the different ways people get in, right? I mean, I focused on phone security and Wi-Fi attacks when I was in that side of the business. And of course, with Wi-Fi, I could always get in because, geez, the stuff they teach you in Wi-Fi, hide the SSID, please do it, and then give yourself a false sense of security. Think that I can't find the SSID. I can, because the SSID is broadcast all the time, even when you turn it off. It's just like, I'm lonely. Come and talk to me. I can associate with any access point. It doesn't matter, right? It's all messed up. So when the attackers understand that, then there's so many ways they can come in.
Exactly. I'm really satisfied to be working as a security architect for a customer these days. And I of course, have this in mind all the time when we design stuff. And often it's not that hard technically to actually do the better configuration. It's not technically difficult to actually do it better. You just have to think and discuss and do the whiteboarding, and then the configuration is almost the same. You just do it differently.
The technology, the products are the same. It's just how we use them that's different. As one high-level executive said, "Oh, we bought the right products, we just put them in the wrong place." Right?
Or you used them the wrong way, or actually didn't use them. I mean, people talk about wrongly configured equipment. What I see is often not configured equipment.
That's true. Or purposefully configured in a way that we now look back on it and say that was wrong, but at the time, that's the way they wanted it. It was chosen to be configured that way. Hey, do any of my countrymen, at least my ancestral countrymen, have any questions out here before we run out of time? Because I'm looking at time and I got a fairly hard stop at the top of the hour. So
yeah. No, it was just some comment on the bamboozled stuff. So the Norwegian word was tull or lure or cheat or confuse. Multiple things. Anyway, well, we are spending a lot of time here. I want one last question that end with a positive thing. What do you see as an easy thing to work with that actually makes a huge improvement pretty fast when you work with the customer in this 5-step phase? Because now we talk about the troubly things. What do you see as the easy thing?
The easy thing is usually to, take your existing technology and put it in a zero trust type policy, right? So if we go to let's see, if I go to the Kipling method policy statements, right? This stuff that we've talked about in the past, who, what, when, where, why, and how. If you have a segmentation gateway, which are typically next generation firewalls. Next generation firewalls exist at layer 7, and there aren't very many other technologies that exist at layer 7. And so because the attackers attack at layer 7, we probably should defend against them at layer 7. Don't you think? That probably would work better. But this is the way you make policy. And so the easiest thing to do is you've got something that exists, a rule, a technology. And actually, that you can use this policy on endpoints. Who should have access via what application? When should that access be allowed? Where is the thing they're accessing? Where is the protect surface? Why are you doing it? That usually, I'm trying to move people into injecting classification tags into metadata of the traffic. And then how are you doing that? That's content ID. So content ID is a specific term for it in Palo Alto speak. And because I worked there for 4 years, I just kind of use that terminology, but this works for other terminologies. What I'm asking is, what am I going to do to the packet to make sure it's clean? Right. So I'm going to, I always IPS, always. I need to inspect the packet. Wildfire or sandboxing. If it is if there's an attachment, I need to run it through a sandbox. Those are simple things that I can do. And if you're in a modern environment, and you don't have a sandboxing tool to look for malware that's embedded into documents. And I've seen malware embedded into DICOM files, which are the image files of an MRI machine. Well, that's not good, right? So if I use this model and take this grid, I've taken this grid here, and I have trained, I've had CEOs say, hey, here's how I want it to do, and just give them a blank grid and start gridding out how you want things to have access, users or devices, because this who could be a device as well as, a machine. So we talk about machine identities and human identities, but really everything is a non-human identity. John is not on the network, right? My identity is an assertion that I've logged into this device and it's generating packets, and so we're asserting that they're coming from John. That may or may not be a true statement. So we have to kind of do some magic in the back with the technology to validate this. This is about getting highly validated, getting data sets that we can validate at a high degree and make these policies as granular as possible, so we have confidence that what we're doing is the correct thing. So that this rule for Salesforce right here, if you're a salesperson or in this sales group, you can use the Salesforce app to get the Salesforce cloud in the US, but we're going to run it through these particular controls to make sure that it's clean. And that gives me a good degree of confidence, or a high degree of confidence, that particular traffic flow should be allowed to come in.
So John, we have 3 minutes till you have to run, and I was thinking about the question, and I in parallel got the question in the Q&A here, because what you say now, layer 7 is where we have to go, and that's a next generation firewall type of role. The question is, everyone is going to the cloud, to the hyperscalers,
right?
And they can use that firewall because that's Microsoft or Amazon or Google. It's kind of limited compared to a next generation firewall, isn't it?
Yeah, I talked to a guy who was one of the original @stake hackers back in the day, and he just said, it's so depressing. It feels like we're back in 1993 again. Yep. You pretend that you have access to a firewall, and all you're doing is a stateless ACL on a router from the old school days, right? We're making things worse by leveraging the native cloud controls. We're making things worse.
I have a last thing to say about that. I compared the hyperscale firewalls with a 6L home firewall, because a firewall from 1988 has one rule when it's new: in any deny. And we human beings have to say what is to be allowed. What do you have with a 6L D-Link firewall at home? You have inbound deny, outbound allow, because behind that firewall you have end user equipment. But when you see Azure having the same rule set as a 6L firewall, inbound deny, outbound allow, what do you have behind the Azure firewall? You have your DOS.
Right.
It's insane. It's
well, it's just the old it's the old adaptive security algorithm. Trusted versus untrusted is going to define policy, which is why I created Zero Trust, because I hated that so much. No, what you do in the cloud, it's really simple. You get a next generation firewall and insert it in the VPC, and you don't use the native cloud stuff. The native cloud stuff is infrastructure. Think of it as your routers and switches and your servers. And then security has to be overlaid on top of it. Just like you did in your regular network, you're going to have to do that in the same cloud network. You cannot rely on the stuff that you're getting from your hyperscalers. It's just not going to be possible. I mean, you can do it, and you're welcome to do it. And quite frankly, I don't care, but you're going to get popped because you did it. And then maybe you lose your job. Maybe you're so far down the totem pole that nobody gets you, but somebody loses their job, right? It's going to be a bad deal.
Yeah. We're out of time, John. One last question about zero trust in an air-gapped network without any access to security cloud resources.
So, yeah, I mean, the reality is even when I go to the US federal government and they think they're on an air-gapped network, they're not. So, are there any air-gapped networks? Maybe. Sure, you should, and why not build a zero trust environment for that network so that the packets moving around, it doesn't matter whether the internet is just the way you get connected, you connect to the malicious actors, right? That's the whole reason the internet exists, is so that the malicious actors can connect to you, makes their life easy. But yeah, I mean, if you had if you look at Stuxnet, could zero trust have stopped that? Probably. But it doesn't matter, because 99.999% of the networks that exist in the world today have access to the internet some way, somehow. There aren't very many air-gapped networks. And I know so why are we talking about such an outlier that it doesn't really matter at all, right? I mean, even the high side networks have ways to get to the internet. They try to put a lot of resources in place. I mean, there's one government network that I know about that has 11 hops to the internet, right? Facebook is really slow on that one. But yeah, there's very few that I've ever seen. And if there are, they're for a specific purpose. And I built one of them once. I built maybe one of the most secure networks ever, and it was highly air gapped, and it had all kinds of things attached to it to make sure it could never the source code it was a source code repository, could ever get out. But you know what? People don't care anymore. They were really concerned about their source code, but now they'll put it in GitLab or GitHub because it's easy. So they quit caring about security because easy became more important than security. So ask yourself, what's more important to me, easy or security? But we can make zero trust secure and easy at the same time. So that isn't a real trade-off anymore. It's just you have to be willing to have the mindset for it.
Yeah. So John, we are about the hour. So thank you again. This is so cool, and I learn new things every time I talk to you, and it's really inspirational. So I thank you very much for that. Maybe I come back to ask you for a similar session on a more perhaps specific topic. I don't know, but I'm not afraid.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
No, happy to do it. It's good to see you, my friend. Always fun to catch up. I miss coming out there and visiting you in COVID. I think weren't we supposed to, what was that island we were supposed to go up to right when COVID hit that spring up on the north?
I don't know. I don't think it was together with me. I think it was together with the Plat Networks team in Norway.
No, I thought it was with you.
Okay.
Weren't we going to do another event up there? And it was just going to be, yeah.
We can you can come again, and let's.
Okay.
I'll make an event.
You'll make an event. Okay, cool. Yeah, I remember it was just up. It was on the northern coast, and there's an island off the side. And I was wondering, because there's that movie out called Narvik. Have you seen this movie?
Yeah.
And I think it was up there, as I remember it, somewhere up in there. There's like a resort.
Lofoten?
Yeah, maybe. Who knows?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Or was you supposed to attend on Svalbard, perhaps on some cyber event?
Yeah. I don't remember. We were going to have an event, and I was like, that was the main. I was really mad at COVID because I had this cool trip coming up to Norway. So
yeah.
Okay, guys.
Next time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Skål, everyone.
Skål. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.